The room went completely silent. My wife had just looked me in the eye, smiled at her friends, and said, "Let's be honest, Nathan just isn't man enough." Everyone laughed. Then someone at the other end of the table quietly said, "Actually, I don't think Nathan's the problem here." That single sentence changed everything. 3 weeks later, my marriage was over, two friendships had collapsed, and the only person crying wasn't me. Here's how it happened. My name is Nathan. I'm 37, an operations manager for a logistics company outside Dallas. My wife, Emily, and I had been married for 6 years. From the outside, we looked like one of those couples who had everything figured out. Nice house, no debt, weekend trips, friends who came over almost every Friday. What nobody saw was how often Emily turned me into the punchline. It never started big. It started with little comments. If Nathan ever cooked, we'd all die. Don't ask him to assemble furniture. He'll need YouTube. He'd lose an argument with a toaster. Everyone laughed, including me, because that's what husbands are supposed to do, right? Laugh it off. I kept telling myself she was joking, that I was being too sensitive, that every couple teased each other. But after a while, I noticed something. The jokes only went one direction. If I teased her back, even gently, the mood changed immediately. Oh wow, someone's defensive. It was just a joke. That phrase became her shield. It was just a joke. Apparently, everything was. 3 months before everything fell apart, Emily became obsessed with hosting dinners. Every other Saturday, our dining room filled with wine glasses, expensive takeout, and the same group of friends. Amanda, Brooke, Tyler, Chris, Megan, and Daniel. Daniel was the oldest among us. Early 40s. Divorced. Corporate attorney. He wasn't loud. He barely spoke unless someone asked him something. But when he did speak, people listened. That Saturday started like every other one. Emily spent almost 2 hours getting ready. She cared more about impressing her friends than actually enjoying the evening. By 7 o'clock, everyone had arrived. Music played softly through the speakers. People laughed. Wine bottles emptied. Stories got louder. I stayed mostly quiet. Not because I was shy, because experience had taught me something. The less I spoke, the fewer opportunities Emily had to make me the joke. Around dessert, Amanda started talking about promotions at work. Tyler joked that every successful woman needed a confident husband. Emily laughed. Oh, confidence isn't Nathan's problem. Everyone looked toward us. She leaned back in her chair, smiling. You know what his problem is. I felt that familiar knot in my stomach. I knew what was coming. She raised her wine glass. He's just not man enough. The table exploded with laughter. Amanda nearly spilled her drink. Brooke covered her mouth. Chris slapped the table. Even people who looked uncomfortable forced little smiles. I looked around the room. Nobody wanted to be the first person to kill the mood. Emily kept going. I mean, I practically make every decision in our house. If I waited for Nathan to lead anything, we'd still be deciding what to eat. More laughter. I noticed Tyler avoiding eye contact. He suddenly became very interested in his plate. Something about that told me. Even he knew she'd gone too far. For years, I would have defended her. I would have smiled, made a joke, changed the subject. Not this time. I simply took another sip of water. No anger, no argument, no speech, just silence. Emily looked disappointed, almost confused, like she'd expected me to play my usual role, the embarrassed husband. Instead, I gave her nothing, and somehow, that irritated her even more. What? She laughed. Don't be so dramatic. It was a joke. I nodded once. Okay. One word. Nothing else. The conversation awkwardly tried to move on. Nobody seemed comfortable anymore. The laughter had disappeared. The room suddenly felt much smaller. Then Daniel put his fork down. He looked directly at Emily. Not at me. At her. He spoke so calmly that everyone stopped eating. Can I ask you something? Emily smiled confidently. Sure. When was the last time you publicly complimented your husband? She blinked. What? I've been coming to these dinners for almost a year. I've heard dozens of jokes about Nathan. I honestly can't remember hearing you say one genuinely kind thing about him. Silence. Amanda stared at her wine. Tyler slowly leaned back. Nobody interrupted. Daniel continued. You call it humor, but humor usually makes everyone laugh. He looked toward me. Tonight, it only made one person smaller. Emily's smile disappeared. You don't know our marriage. No, I only know what you choose to show people. And honestly, if this is the version you think makes you look good, I'd hate to see the version nobody else sees. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument I'd ever been part of. Emily's face turned bright red. For the first time all night, she had no joke ready. She looked at me, expecting me to defend her. Instead, I quietly stood up, picked up the empty dessert plates, and carried them into the kitchen. 30 seconds later, I heard the dining room explode into an argument. And then, someone said something that made me stop walking. Emily, I think Nathan's been covering for you a lot longer than any of us realized. I stayed in the kitchen for another minute. Not because I needed to wash the plates, because I needed a reason not to walk back into that dining room. I stood there, staring at the sink, listening. Nobody was laughing anymore. Emily's voice was the loudest. Seriously, you're all acting like I committed a crime. Daniel answered calmly. No, we're acting like you embarrassed your husband for entertainment. It's called joking. It stopped sounding like a joke months ago. There was another long silence. Then Amanda spoke for the first time. I kind of agree. Emily almost laughed. You're kidding. Amanda shook her head. I've always thought you were just teasing him, but tonight felt different. Brooke quietly nodded. I didn't want to say anything. Emily looked around the table. So now everyone's turning against me. No, Daniel replied. We're finally saying something. I walked back into the dining room. Nobody looked at me. The attention was still on Emily. She folded her arms. Nathan doesn't care. She pointed toward me. Tell them. I looked around the table. Every face was waiting. For years, I would have rescued the moment. I would have smiled and said, she's right, it's just our sense of humor. Instead, I answered honestly, I've asked you to stop. Emily's smile disappeared. What? I asked you. More than once. I told you those jokes bothered me. The room became completely still. She immediately shook her head. That's not true. It is. You never said that. I did. When? Last October. You laughed. I laughed because you laughed. I didn't want another argument. Amanda slowly looked at Emily. You really didn't remember. Emily's confidence slipped for the first time. I don't know. I wasn't finished. Then again, after Christmas, when your brother laughed at me for 20 minutes. And again, after your birthday dinner. I told you it made me feel small. You hugged me. You apologized. And then you did it again. Nobody said a word. Emily suddenly pushed her chair back. Oh my God. So now I'm abusive. No. I said your jokes hurt me. That's completely different. You always do this. When someone calls you out, you exaggerate what they said. She stared at me. So everyone thinks I'm a monster now. I never said that. Daniel quietly leaned forward. Emily, listen to yourself. He tells you he felt disrespected. Your first instinct isn't curiosity. It's self-defense. Dinner ended early. People left one by one. Nobody hugged goodbye. Nobody stayed for another drink. Tyler quietly shook my hand before leaving. I'm sorry. I nodded. So am I. Daniel was the last person to leave. He paused near the front door. I probably overstepped. I shook my head. No. You probably said what should have been said years ago. He gave a small nod. I hope things work out. So do I. But even as I said it, I wasn't sure I believed it anymore. The drive home was silent. Emily stared out the passenger window. Normally after parties, she'd talk the entire ride. Tonight, nothing. And we pulled into the driveway. She finally spoke. You embarrassed me. I almost laughed. I embarrassed you. You let Daniel lecture me. I didn't invite him to. You could have defended me. I defended you for 6 years. I was tired. She looked at me like she'd never seen me before. So that's it. You're choosing them over your wife. I'm choosing honesty. They finally saw what I've been pretending they couldn't. For the next few days, Emily acted like nothing had happened. No apology. No conversation. Nothing. But something had changed. Not in her. In me. I stopped explaining myself. Stopped trying to keep the peace. Stopped fixing little problems before she noticed them. If she forgot to pay a bill, I didn't remind her. If she left dishes everywhere, I quietly cleaned only mine. If she ignored me, I stopped asking what was wrong. The silence wasn't punishment. It was exhaustion. 3 days later, she finally confronted me. You've been acting weird. I've been acting calm. No, you're pulling away. I looked up from my laptop. I think I've just stopped pretending. Pretending what? That everything's okay. She rolled her eyes. You're still upset about dinner. I'm upset about the 6 years before dinner. She scoffed. You're unbelievable. No, I was unbelievably patient. That Friday, she invited Amanda over. I wasn't trying to listen, but our home office shared a wall with the living room. Their voices carried. Amanda sounded nervous. I think you should apologize. Emily laughed. For what? For humiliating Nathan. I didn't humiliate him. I made a joke. Amanda sighed. It wasn't one joke. It was every dinner, every birthday, every holiday, every time we got together. There was a long pause. Then Emily quietly asked, So, you all talk about me? Amanda answered honestly, Only because we were worried. Emily's voice hardened. So Daniel turns everyone against me, and suddenly I'm the bad guy. No, you did that yourself. Later that night, Emily walked into our bedroom. I have one question. I looked up from my book. What? If I apologize, will everything go back to normal? I thought about that for a long time. Long enough that she became uncomfortable. Finally, I answered. I don't think normal is what I want anymore. For the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. Not because I had yelled. Not because I threatened divorce. But because I sounded completely certain. She whispered, So, what are you saying? I quietly closed the book. I'm saying I need some space. Her face went pale. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious. She stared at me for several seconds, waiting for me to soften, to explain, to comfort her. I didn't. The next morning, while she was still asleep, I scheduled an appointment with a marriage counselor and another one with a divorce attorney. Not because I had made a decision, because for the first time, I realized I needed to understand what both futures looked like. That afternoon, Emily picked up my phone to check the grocery list. The attorney's appointment notification appeared on the screen. She froze. Then she slowly looked at me. You called a lawyer. I met her eyes, and for the first time in our marriage, I didn't rush to explain. You called a lawyer. Emily's voice barely rose above a whisper. I looked at her for a second before locking my phone. I did. She stared at me like she was waiting for the rest of the sentence. An explanation. An apology. Some reassurance that everything was still fixable. None came. You've been planning this behind my back. I've been preparing for the possibility that nothing changes. That's not the same thing. It is when I've spent 6 years asking to be heard. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. For the first time since we'd met, Emily didn't seem to know how to win an argument. The marriage counselor saw us the following Tuesday. She spent most of the session asking questions neither of us had ever asked each other. Not about money. Not about chores. Not about intimacy. About respect. Halfway through the session, she looked at Emily. When was the last time you made your husband feel admired instead of corrected? Emily looked down at her hands. I don't know. The counselor nodded. That's usually how emotional distance begins. No one spoke for several seconds. Then Emily quietly said, I never thought he was going to leave. I answered before the counselor could. I know. And that's exactly why we're here. Things changed after that. Emily stopped making jokes at my expense. She thanked me when I did something around the house. She apologized when she interrupted me. She even canceled the next dinner with our friends. A few months earlier, those changes would have meant everything. Now they felt like someone trying to fix a roof after the house had already flooded. I appreciated the effort. I just couldn't rebuild the feeling I'd already lost. A week later, Daniel called. I wanted to check on you. We talked for 15 minutes. Before hanging up, he said something I still think about. I don't believe your marriage ended because of what happened at dinner. It ended because dinner was the first time everyone else saw what you'd been living with. I sat on the back porch long after the call ended, watching the sunset, realizing he was right. That night hadn't changed my marriage. It had removed my last excuse to ignore it. Emily found me there. She sat beside me without saying anything. After a while, she quietly asked, Do you still love me? I answered honestly, I care about you. That's not what I asked. No, it isn't. A tear rolled down her cheek. I would have changed. You are changing. She looked at me hopefully. Then why isn't that enough? I took a long breath. Because people don't leave the day respect disappears. They leave the day they realize it disappeared a long time ago. 2 weeks later, I signed the divorce papers. There wasn't a dramatic fight. No screaming. No lawyers arguing across a courtroom. Just 2 signatures. 2 quiet people. And a marriage that had slowly run out of chances. As we walked toward the parking lot, Emily stopped me. I'm sorry. I know. I mean it. I know. I wish I understood sooner. I believed her. That was the hardest part. She wasn't lying anymore. She had simply realized the truth too late. The house sold 3 months later. I moved into a smaller place closer to work. It wasn't as nice, but for the first time in years, it felt peaceful. Amanda reached out a few times. Tyler invited me to watch football. Even Daniel and I grabbed lunch every couple of months. One afternoon, I asked him something that had been on my mind since that dinner. Why did you speak up? He smiled. Because everyone else was waiting for someone else to do it. And because I kept wondering, if someone talked to my son the way Emily talked to you, what advice would I give him? I already knew the answer. About 6 months after the divorce, I ran into Emily at a grocery store. She looked healthier, calmer. We talked for a few minutes. Nothing awkward, nothing emotional. Before we walked away, she quietly said, I still hear that question sometimes. What question? She smiled sadly. When was the last time you admired your husband? I didn't have an answer. I think about that every week. I nodded. I hope one day you do. She smiled through watery eyes. I hope so too. Then we walked in opposite directions. Looking back, our marriage didn't end the night my wife said I wasn't man enough. It ended long before that. That dinner simply exposed something we'd both been pretending not to see. Respect had quietly disappeared. And once respect is gone, love eventually starts packing its bags too. The best decision I ever made wasn't leaving my marriage. It was finally refusing to stay in a relationship where I had to earn the basic respect that should have been there all along.